Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video we take a look at the underrated rogue, the Shade. Welcome to this new series on the channel. It's been a while since I started a new proper series here. Obviously, I think Batman's Rogues Gallery is the greatest of them all, but that doesn't mean I don't like other villains as well. In this series, I'll be shining the spotlight on some of these villains, specifically ones I feel are underrated. I'm not saying that they're really obscure and forgotten. Some of them have their fan bases and are fairly popular in the comic book community. However, they aren't as big and well known like, say, Darkseid, Dr. Doom, and Sinestro. I personally feel that they could be, and in some cases really should be. DC Rogues will be featured predominantly in this series, since that's the universe I know best, but I'm hoping to squeeze in some Marvel villains as well. I will feature Bat Rogues too, considering that some of them, while not major characters, are still too well known to qualify as forgotten Batman villains. Like the Ratcatcher, for instance. I was initially going to cover him in forgotten Batman villains, but now I think he'd fit better as simply an underrated rogue. By the way, feel free to suggest your own underrated rogues, be they from Gotham City, the rest of the DC universe, or even Marvel. No guarantee that I'll be able to cover them though, considering I'm not familiar with every single comic book villain. In some cases, if a character interests me though, I might be up for doing some research. Anyway, let's talk about the Shade. The Shade made his first appearance in Flash Comics number 33, published in 1942, the same year as Two-Face first appeared. So yeah, old Shade's been around for a very long time. The story, titled The Man Who Commanded the Night, was written by E. Hibbard and penciled by Gardner Fox. In it, the Shade is introduced as a mysterious master criminal who uses a machine to create eternal pitch-black darkness in the city of Keystone. Shade and his crew exploit the darkness to their advantage, eliminating the city's entire police force, and then loots the town of all its riches. Naturally, the villains face opposition from Keystone's protector, the original Flash, Jay Garrick. This was the sole appearance the Shade made during the Golden Age, and he didn't return until 19 years later. It was the classic Flash of Two Worlds, the story that introduced the multiverse into DC Comics, that reintroduced the character. This was of course in Flash 123, published in 1961, featuring the writing of Gardner Fox and the pencils of Carmine Infantino. In this landmark story, the second Silver Age Flash, Barry Allen, visits Earth 2 for the first time, a duplicate yet somewhat different version of our world. There he meets the original Golden Age Flash, Jay Garrick, reimagined as the Flash of Earth 2. Shade was also reinvented as a villain of this alternate Earth, complete with a new design and a new weapon, a cane that is capable of creating and manipulating darkness and shadows. With two Flashes around, the master criminal sees it fit to even the odds, and teams up with two other Earth 2 rogues, the Fiddler and the Thinker. After this seminal comic, Shade continued to make occasional appearances throughout the Silver and Bronze Age, mostly fighting the Flashes, Barry and Jay. So originally Shade was a Flash rogue through and through. However, in 1994, after both Crisis on Infinite Earths and Zero Hour, two sorta reboots of the DC Universe, writer James Robinson decided to bring back the character in a big way and once again reinvent him, although this time far more drastically. Shade was brought back in the pages of Robinson's Starman series, a comic that continued the legacy of a fairly obscure Golden Age DC hero, Ted Knight, aka Starman. In Robinson's title, Ted was depicted as an old retired superhero from Opal City who passed on the mantle of Starman to his son, Jack. The Shade was introduced in this comic not as a villain, but as a supporting character. Robinson completely reimagined the Duke of Darkness as a morally ambiguous gentleman thief and adventurer. His shadow powers were also portrayed as an actual mystic and supernatural ability, as opposed to being derived from scientific gadgets. The character was also given a background and origin for the first time, although several parts of it still remained unknown, such as the exact nature of his powers and his actual name. We were told that he was once a sophisticated gentleman living in London in the early 1800s, where he experienced a mystic rite that killed over 100 people and granted him the shadow powers, and yes, immortality. For over a century, Shade lived as a roguish adventurer, traveling the world, embarking upon quests, pulling off daring heists, performing assassinations, really any type of fun recreation you can think of. But sometime in the mid-20th century, he settled down in Starman's town, Opal City, which he discovered during his adventures and had grown to love. After the original Starman retired, however, Opal slowly began to deteriorate and crime went on the rise. When Jack takes over his father's mantle, the Shade is prompted to aid the young hero and act as an ally and sort of mentor, all in the best interest of his beloved city of Opal. This new anti-hero take on a character garnered him a small cult following among comic readers, which led to Shade's own 4-issue miniseries in 1997, also written by Robinson. This title further explored his rascally background, such as his playful rivalry with the Golden Age Flash, Jay Garrick, during the 40s and 50s, his century-and-a-half-long battle with the Ludlow family, a line of vengeful scoundrels, was also established. James Robinson's Starman series came to an end in 2001, after 80 issues and 7 years, which left the Shade without a home. He made occasional appearances here and there, but it seemed like no one really dared to mess with what Robinson had created. In 2011, with the New 52 sort of reboot, Robinson returned the character to the limelight with a 12-issue maxi-series. This title takes the Shade on a globe-trotting quest, finally fully revealing his past and origins along the way, including his real name, Richard Swift. He appeared most recently in a 3-parter in the new DC Rebirth Flash series, a story which I actually haven't had a chance to read yet. I am really interested in it though, and it's cool to see Shade show up in a Flash comic once again. Those of you who've read it, let me know in the comments if it's actually any good. The Duke of Darkness has appeared in other media outside of the comics as well. He made several appearances on the animated Justice League show, always alongside other rogues, as a member of some sort of secret society of supervillains styled group. This take on the character was based on the old classic, pre-Robinson version, however. Shade also recently appeared on a live-action Flash TV show. I still haven't started watching season 3 yet, so I haven't seen this episode. From what I've read about it though, the depiction seems really lame and absolutely nothing like the Robinson version. Of course, don't take my word for it as I haven't seen it yet. I've always loved the Shade, ever since I saw him in an old 70s Justice League comic, where he teamed up with Dr. Light, I believe, and another rogue I can't remember. I thought his visual design was awesome, the pale face, the weird black outfit, and the top hat. Plus I really liked his power to manipulate shadows. He kind of reminds me of a horror movie Boogeyman somehow. While the old classic version never was that interesting of a character, I'll always feel it was a great concept for a creepy and awesome villain. Like most people, I do of course prefer the Robinson take. It portrays him as a fascinating, charismatic, morally grey badass, who's not really a villain, yet certainly not a hero either. The modern Shade is a man of honor, often performing good deeds, but he doesn't shy away from the occasional selfish act, and is not afraid to take to violence. Mortal and very brutal violence, that is. The things he sometimes do with his shadow constructs. The Robinson version is like something out of a horror movie too. So why do I feel that the Shade is underrated? I mean, he starred in his own limited series twice. Well, I feel that he could do so much more than that. I want the character to appear more often in the comics, and he should most definitely make a big jump into other forms of media. You could really do an entire Shade TV show, or a Shade film series. He's just that good of a character. I know the mainstream would love him too. Dark, brutal, morally grey anti-heroes are all the rage these days. Just imagine it, an R-rated Shade movie. Why isn't DC and Warner Brothers doing this? I think Deadpool, Guardians of the Galaxy and Suicide Squad proved that you don't need to be a well-known franchise in order to attract the audience. If they just tried and weren't so scared and incompetent, I think the Shade could get as big and popular as the Joker or Wolverine. That's the kind of potential I see in him. So yeah, 2 measly little limited series sure as hell ain't enough. So there you have it. That's the story of the Shade, an amazing rogue with a great characterization, visual design and power. One of my favorite non-Batman villains, or anti-heroes, or whatever you wanna call them. Anyway, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.